And Bitcoin gives you a lot of options because all of a sudden, if you're stacking consistently Bitcoin, you probably, and for a long time, you probably put some money to the side. So you could probably afford, let's say, 2 months, 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, maybe even like 10 years without income. This gives you the optionality to say, I'm no longer willing to trade my life for that work or for that whatever you're doing. I'm quitting that and I'm searching for a better alternative. I want to have a better life. And I think that's something really powerful because a lot of Bitcoiners, like most Bitcoiners, get in that, oh, I'm stacking, I have some savings plan set up and all of those things. And this gives you really a lot of optionality and freedom.
It is a savings plan that actually works. And it's growing up in the US, my parents were told the same thing, right? It's you just you go through the system, you get a degree, you get a good job, you do a good job, you save your money, right? And invest a little bit of it, but be careful because investments are risky, right? But you do that and you'll be okay. And that was all a lie. It was all a lie because you're playing in a rigged system and nobody told you originally what the real rules were, right? I mean, there are people, older individuals, right, like my parents' age in their 70s, late 60s, early 70s, that to some degree still believe that, the US dollar is backed by all the gold in Fort Knox. I'm like, "Wait, read one book, right? And it's you learn about, Nixon, and you learn about going off the gold standard, and you learn about inflation, all this, and you're just like, it's a rigged system. I I don't so I don't want to play in that system anymore. I'm done with that system, right? And then you have no respect for that system. You don't buy into the propaganda, and you just go with what you know and you feel is right. And yeah, it just changes your life. It can change your life if you let it. So
You said something interesting before. You said something back in the days when Bitcoin was still risk on. When did it for you? Or is it? I presume for you now you see Bitcoin as a risk off asset. When did it became for you a risk off asset? How do you look at that?
so yeah, I'm definitely not that. There's probably a lot of people out there smart enough to say, we're seeing that shift now and kind of saying economically. I guess it's more of a personal opinion and a personal decision, right? It becomes a risk off for anyone once they get to a point where they understand it, right? So everybody's different. Um, to me, it was in 2022. I had started in September of 21, I think September 21, with this company, and started working with these Bitcoiners and meeting them and just spending time with them, working with them on projects, started studying a little bit. And I was like, I treated it like every other investment. I was like, man, these guys are dumping millions and millions of dollars into these sites, like tens and hundreds of millions of dollars into these sites. They must know something I don't. And so since they're all smarter than me, I'm going to start investing in Bitcoin, but I treated it like an investment. And so I started dollar cost averaging just a little bit in, but then I realized really quickly what little, you know, investments I had in like an IRA, like a Roth IRA or something like in other investment accounts. Bitcoin was very rapidly catching up with that. It was outpacing it through even as a DCA, and it was going down, 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 down. But I just kept reading, kept listening to Saylor and doing more and more research, and but I was still kind of, it's cool, I get it, deflationary, but it's still an investment. It's volatile. At the end of 22, it clicked. I was like, okay, um, if Bitcoin has more than a 0% chance of going up in value, there's 100% chance the dollars I hold will go down in value, right? To me, that's better odds, right? Like rather than holding something that is melting away, I want to hold something that is hard and is going to be there and is, I can depend on, right? So And I also, but I was still looking at it from an investment perspective. So I was like, okay, well, $20,000, it's gone down from 64,000 or 65,000. Man, I think that's the bottom. And so I went all in. Like I cashed out everything else and went all into Bitcoin. And then I cried as it dropped to 16 because I was like, oh no, what have I done to our finances, to my family? I have ruined us. Bitcoin's going to die. It's going to lose, right? I was one of those guys who's like, Bitcoin died today, right? So I cried through the holidays and got through to January. And I just said, you know what? I give up. If I'm not going to win the fiat game, I'm not going to win with Bitcoin. I'm just not going to win. I'm just done. I give up. And so I didn't make any changes. I didn't like liquidate it. I just let it sit. And it started creeping up. And then in January, it was like already back up to 20. It was a really low 25% or really short dip. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, now I'm back at break even. So I feel a little better. But I was still very stressed and working. And then it just kept moving and kept moving up and kept moving up and kept moving up. And at that point, I realized it clicked what it was. And it was not a matter of, because of the scarcity built into it, right? That is mathematically a part of it. You can't break that. You either play by the mathematical rules of Bitcoin or you don't get to play. I couldn't put enough money into it. Like my paycheck would come in and I'd seen an interview with Jack Mallers and he said, I think it'd be great if everybody just put all their money in Bitcoin and then cashed out once a month to pay their bills. And I was like, that sounds good. Let's try that. Uh, some months it worked out, some months it didn't, but more often than not, it was a positive move. I would put money in, it would go up. And by the time a month later I needed to pay my bills, I had additional Bitcoin, right? I was profitable technically. I was paying, and I was like, oh, so this is what they mean by deflationary currency. Uh, any money I have now, or I could spend the money now and pay my bill early, or if I wait even 30 days, I'm paying less, right? So if Bitcoin went up 10%, I was only paying 90% of my bills. I had used money in the past to pay bills in the future, but my cost average for those bills had gone down. And so once that clicked, I was like, I'm in. I'm just in. So transacting in Bitcoin as much as possible, getting paid in Bitcoin as much as possible, paying with Bitcoin as much as possible. You can still report your stuff to your taxes, right? Still do that. Whatever you want to, you can play it as however you want to do, right? It just gives you the freedom to decide that. And if it truly is a deflationary currency, which it is, then, the longer you hold on to it, the better it is. And so I saw that now as just playing the fiat game. I just had a better tool to play the game, right? I had the trump card. I was able to actually beat the system because I saw how it was broken and Bitcoin was the way out of it. And so at that point, maybe around late 23, early 24, when I started making some good money, my paycheck would come in. I would immediately empty my bank account. I'd, buy Bitcoin through River. Now sometimes I buy some in the Fold app, right? And just leave it there until I need to use my debit card to pay bills or whatever. Um, and it's some months, yeah, okay. It may look like I lost some money, right? But long term, it's gonna it's been amazing. Timing for me was lucky too, right? I came in 22 and then had 2 years to build. So I got to experience all of that from.
Interesting. So you live on a 100%
I
Bitcoin
have
standard,
about
basically.
$5,000 of cash at any given time loaded on my Fold card, and almost all of my other balances are zero.
Wow, I love that. That's shows the. I always say, and I'm very similar. I I don't have this
Yeah.
$5,000. I'm totally on zero.
Well, I have 5,000 just because, like, in the next week or two, right, I have bills coming up due. So it's like I've decided that's just the number to always have there, right? But I think if there's a lot of Bitcoiners out there that they have a lot of Bitcoin, so they're not as worried about it. So maybe they have, you know, they may still have, 30, 40, 50, $100,000 cash plus other investments. If every single Bitcoiner went to zero or as close to zero, or maybe even like, they were 2%, 3%, right? They really did that. You would see a huge, and they did it with self custody. You would see a huge shift in the amount available on exchanges. Some of the paper Bitcoin Ponzi's that I think are kind of coming around and playing right now with some of the exchanges. I don't have any proof of that, but just a feeling. Then I think a lot of that would be exposed. Um, Things would rapidly change across all financial ecosystems. It would just happen almost overnight if we were able to do that. So, and I realized that um, listening to Maulers talk about it, right? And I was like, yeah, it's like if you exit the system as soon as you possibly can, you're basically throwing your dollars back at them, saying, "I don't need this crap. It's worthless. It's not worth anything." And I'd rather do that now before we go to hyperinflation, you know, and we have another, Zimbabwe or Argentina or, all these other countries, because that eventually will happen with the dollar. So I just want to be on the right side of it. I don't know when it's going to happen. So I want to be on the right side of it, regardless of when it happens.
That's a good way because if you're still trying to time the market, which you would do if you are not 100% there where you want to be. So let's say if you have like 20% of your portfolio in fiat cash, not because as a security to pay your bills, but as buying the dip opportunity down the road, you're basically
Yep.
timing the
Yeah.
market at that point. If you get that you don't want to have fiat, I mean, maybe you have other investments, that's fine, but you are timing the market if you have cash on the side just for the sake of maybe being able to buy more Bitcoin with that. And timing the market with Bitcoin is
It's dangerous,
a dangerous
very
thing.
dangerous. And I think it's interesting because people will say that it's like, well, I want that as an emergency, right? Well, one of the biggest, tools, lopsided uh, rules in the fiat system that people who are rich and successful understand, and people that are broke and poor may never get a hold of, and that's debt, right? How to properly use debt. Um, it is a tool that they're using um, to keep people down. Well, if you have that much money, cash available, it's a pretty good safe bet that you've got a nice credit score of, 700, 720, maybe higher, right? So if you've got a good credit score, you can get a 25, $30,000 credit card tomorrow that just they're like, yeah, unsecured debt. Yeah, just take it, whatever, right? And you can take it. Um, I got and you can take it and use it. And that's your emergency fund, right? And then if I have to liquidate Bitcoin later, great. But then I took it a step further after listening to Saylor. And this was it by all other rules of investing and finance. It was the dumbest thing I ever could have done. But I took a $20,000 credit card and I bought Bitcoin down around like 25, 30,000, right? I just bought, so it was like maybe 80% of a coin at the time, something like that. And I took it and I decided I'm going to cash out the Bitcoin I bought with this to make minimum or to make payments on this with the 20% interest rate. And I'm going to do that for 1 year. Now, if I have to liquidate other Bitcoin, if things go crazy and I feel like I'm losing this battle, I'll liquidate and I've lost some Bitcoin. That's fine, but this is a risk I'm going to take. Um, I did that for 12 months and I still had half a Bitcoin by the time everything was said and done because Bitcoin went up. I timed the market correctly with that, right? But then I looked at it, looked at all my other stuff, and I was like, oh, but my man, if you don't want that risk, just do a DCA, dollar cost average weekly or paycheck stack, and it actually it almost perform just as well, right? Because at the same time, I was taking money from that I would earn every 2 weeks or every month, and I would put it into Bitcoin and just let it sit, right? Bitcoin is so strong a tool over a long enough time period. I did it with 12 months and I got lucky. But if you did it over 5 or 6 or 7 months, years, or 8 or 10 years, which you could do with a credit card, right? All you're doing is accelerating that collapse. You're taking more and more money out of that system. Um, every time debt is issued, it's not a bank that has, like, if I have a credit card and I charge $5,000 on it, that's not a bank somewhere that has $5,000 that they're paying on my behalf and then, oh, well, you better pay us back. It's literally ones and zeros being created out of thin air, right? There's no real dollars backing that debt, right? If you truly want fiat to accelerate and disappear, doing those kinds of things just accelerates it, right? Um, and so I was very radicalized, after reading and studying to the point where I was willing to try that. To be fair, I don't take that much risk on anymore, even though I think that Bitcoin is very close to uh, only upside, very very little downside. I think we're about to see a switch flip, hopefully. But even so, the nice thing about it is Bitcoin can help you regardless of what your personal um, risk aversion is, right? If you just want long-term savings and don't want your time and energy devalued, just put it, no more savings accounts, just put savings into Bitcoin. If you want, like Saylor said in his presentation, you want to get aggressive, you're going to, leverage your house, you're going to leverage unsecured debt, you're going to sell everything you own, sell all your shares, and you're going to go all in. But you can do that, right? You can. But it, I think whatever you do, you just get in as hard as you personally feel comfortable with, and Bitcoin will meet you wherever that is. That's the great thing about it.
Yes. Have you noticed outside of financial things that Bitcoin, since you are full on Bitcoin and have like the the Bitcoin Zen found, has that changed the way you make decisions or
Oh yeah,
anything like that?
yeah. What my favorite part? Well, there's a lot of good things, right? But my favorite part about it probably is still the financial side. So, like, I hired somebody to help me out with a project, and I can't remember what the amount was, but let's say it's like $5,000 for 30 days worth of work, or a couple weeks worth of work or something. And I said okay, well, yeah, here's my agreement with you, and I'll pay you 5,000 for this work once it's done. And he said sure. And I had all my money in Bitcoin, and then I waited 30 days, and that $5,000 in Bitcoin was now worth like $6,000. Like, it had gone up like 15-20%, right? And I realized at that point, I was like, oh, okay. Uh, I'm not agreeing, even with Bitcoiners, and they don't like this. I'm never negotiating in Bitcoin's price, right? I'm going to negotiate in the worthless fiat currency price, because $5,000 today not only goes down in as little as a month in purchasing power, the Bitcoin actually appreciates. So I got a double whammy. I got an appreciation here and I got a depreciation on the currency. This spread right here is where I, prosper, right? And that gap is become, and that thing is becoming wider. Those two trend lines are getting further and further apart.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.